The dust settled on the deserted highway as the convoy of trucks rolled forward, unaware of the ambush waiting ahead. Armed cartel gunmen stepped into the road, their rifles raised, their intentions clear. But what they didn't know? One of those truckers wasn't just another driver. He was something far deadlier. Before we continue, have you ever faced a moment where you had to stand your ground against overwhelming odds? Share your story in the comments. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more intense tales. The sun hung low over the Mexican desert, casting long shadows over the endless stretch of asphalt. The convoy of semi-trucks rumbled along the isolated highway, their hulking forms kicking up dust in the golden light. The lead truck, a gleaming white Peterbilt, was driven by a seasoned trucker named Jack Calloway. A man with graying hair, a thick beard, and a past that most would never guess just by looking at him. Jack had spent decades on the road, running routes across the most dangerous parts of North America. He had seen it all: thieves, corrupt cops, desperate hitchhikers, but nothing fazed him anymore. He wasn't just a trucker, he was a man who had lived a dozen lives before settling into the driver's seat. A former Marine, a survivalist, and a man who knew how to handle himself when things went sideways. Tonight, Jack was leading a convoy of 3 trucks carrying high-value cargo, medical supplies, industrial equipment, and, most importantly, a shipment of rare auto parts destined for the United States. The client had warned them about cartel activity along the route, but Jack wasn't worried. He had been through worse. The CB radio crackled to life. "Hey, Jack, you seeing what I'm seeing up ahead?" came the voice of Reggie, another trucker in the convoy. Jack squinted through the windshield. In the distance, dust rose in the air, the telltale sign of multiple vehicles blocking the road. His grip on the wheel tightened. "I see it," Jack replied. "Slow it down, but keep rolling. We don't stop unless we have to." The convoy gradually reduced speed as they approached. Jack's instincts told him this wasn't a routine checkpoint. The closer they got, the more he saw the silhouettes of armed men standing in the middle of the road, their black-clad figures framed against the orange horizon. Cartel. A dozen of them, maybe more. Some held rifles, others pistols, and a few had bandoliers of ammunition slung over their chests. They were heavily armed, and they knew exactly what they were doing. The blockade was made of a few rusted-out cars positioned across the highway, making it impossible to pass without stopping. Jack exhaled slowly, his mind working fast. He flicked the CB radio. "Reggie, Clyde, keep your heads on a swivel. This ain't a routine stop." Reggie cursed under his breath. "Damn it, Jack. What's the play here?" Jack checked the pistol tucked under his seat. "We stay calm. No sudden moves. Let me do the talking." As the trucks came to a stop, the cartel gunmen fanned out, approaching with purpose. Jack could see the leader, an older man with a deep scar running across his cheek, striding toward his door. Jack knew one thing for certain. These men weren't just looking for a bribe. They were looking for blood. Jack Calloway kept his hands on the wheel, his sharp eyes scanning the armed men approaching his truck. The desert air was thick with tension as the cartel gunmen fanned out, surrounding the convoy. Their leader, the scar-faced man in a black tactical vest, approached Jack's door with an air of absolute authority. His men stood ready, fingers twitching near their triggers. Jack cracked the window just enough to hear the man speak. "You've picked the wrong road, amigo," the leader said in heavily accented English. His voice was calm, but there was an unmistakable undercurrent of menace. "This is cartel territory. You don't pass unless we say so." Jack's jaw clenched, but he forced a smile. "We're just truckers, friend. Got medical supplies and auto parts headed for the States. No trouble, no problems." The man smirked, glancing at his men. "No trouble. That depends. We take what we want, and you go free. Sound fair?" Jack could hear the murmurs from the other truckers on the CB radio, their nerves on edge. He knew what the cartel really wanted, more than just cargo. If they gave up their load, they'd be left stranded in the middle of the desert if they were lucky. If not, they'd be buried in it. Jack let out a slow breath. "Look, We both know how this goes. We give you what you want, and maybe you let us live, or maybe you don't. Either way, we lose." The leader's smirk faded. He stepped closer, resting a gloved hand on the door. "That's a dangerous way to think, viejo." His fingers tapped against the metal. "Step out of the truck." Jack didn't move. His mind calculated the odds. There were at least 15 gunmen, all positioned around the trucks. He could see 2 men near Reggie's rig, trying to pry open the trailer. Clyde's truck was surrounded by another 4. They were boxed in, outgunned, and outnumbered. But Jack had one advantage. They thought they were dealing with ordinary truckers. "All right," Jack said finally, lifting his hands. "I'll step out." He moved slowly, unbuckling his seatbelt and pushing the door open. As he stepped down, his boots hitting the dirt, the leader smirked. "Good choice, old man." Jack nodded, keeping his posture relaxed. "Yeah," he muttered, "except for one thing." Before the man could react, Jack's left hand shot up, grabbing the cartel leader by the wrist, twisting it with bone-crushing force. The man screamed as his gun fell to the ground. Jack moved fast, faster than any of them expected. In a single motion, he spun the man around, using his body as a human shield. The gunmen hesitated, their rifles now pointed at their own leader. "Now," Jack growled, his grip tightening around the man's throat. "We're gonna do this my way." The cartel had underestimated him, and that was their first mistake. The air around the convoy grew thick with uncertainty. The cartel gunmen hesitated, their fingers twitching near their triggers. Jack kept his grip firm around their leader's throat, using him as a human shield. The man struggled, his hands clawing at Jack's iron grip, but Jack held firm. "Back up," Jack ordered, his voice calm but commanding. "Unless you want your boss here with a snapped neck." The gunmen exchanged nervous glances. They were trained killers, used to intimidation. But this was unexpected. Jack wasn't just some trucker pleading for his life. He was a man who had been in situations far worse than this. "Shoot him," one of the gunmen barked. Jack smirked. "Go ahead. You put a bullet in me and your boss here won't be breathing by the time I hit the ground." The leader, gasping for air, managed to croak, "Hold your fire! Hold your fire!" Jack slowly stepped backward, dragging the man with him. His eyes flicked toward the other truckers. Reggie, Clyde, and the others were watching, waiting. They knew Jack well enough to recognize the shift. This wasn't just survival. This was a calculated move. A voice crackled through Jack's earpiece, Reggie's voice. "Jack, what's the play here?" Jack kept his voice steady. "We're gonna turn the tables. Get ready." The cartel leader coughed, his voice rasping. "You think this ends here, viejo? You think you can walk away from this?" Jack leaned in, his grip tightening just enough to make the man wheeze. "I don't walk away. I finish what I start." Then, with a sudden burst of force, Jack threw the cartel leader forward, straight into one of his own men. The second of confusion was all the truckers needed. Gunfire erupted. Jack dove behind a truck, rolling into cover as bullets tore through the dust-filled air. The truckers, already prepared, returned fire. Reggie had his shotgun up, Clyde pulled his pistol, and the others followed suit. They weren't just truckers. They were men who had seen combat before. The cartel gunmen, now in chaos, scrambled for better positions. Some ran for cover behind their own vehicles. Others blindly fired into the convoy, unsure of where the next attack would come from. Jack reloaded his weapon, his mind razor-sharp. This wasn't just about getting out alive. This was about sending a message. The cartel had made a mistake stopping them. Now they were about to pay the price. As bullets ripped through the dry desert air, the cartel gunmen scrambled to recover from the sudden counterattack. Dust clouds rose from the gravel road as truckers and cartel fighters exchanged gunfire, the roar of engines and distant sirens adding to the chaos. But amidst the fight, Jack wasn't just thinking about survival. He was planning his next move. He had spent years in the military, training for situations just like this. The cartel gunmen were aggressive but undisciplined, relying on brute force rather than strategy. That was their weakness. Jack knew how to turn this battle on its head. Then, out of nowhere, the cartel leader barked an order in Spanish and suddenly, the gunfire stopped. Silence blanketed the scene, except for the low hum of truck engines idling in the distance. Jack peered from behind cover, his breath steady. The gunmen were regrouping, but instead of attacking, they were retreating toward a set of SUVs parked near the highway. Something wasn't right. Cartels didn't just back down. And then he saw it, the real twist. A second convoy was approaching from the south, kicking up dust in the distance. But it wasn't reinforcements for the cartel. It was the Mexican Federal Police. The cartel had intercepted the wrong convoy, mistaking Jack and his team for an arms shipment they had been expecting. But now, the real shipment had been reported missing, and someone higher up must have sounded the alarm. The police had been tracking them. Jack's radio crackled. Reggie's voice came through. "Jack, you seeing this?" "I see it," Jack responded, watching as the cartel gunmen hesitated. The cartel leader snarled at his men, pointing at Jack. "Kill them now, before they arrive." The gunmen lifted their rifles again, but Jack wasn't about to wait for them to make the first move. He sprang from behind cover, sprinting toward the nearest cartel vehicle. The gunmen barely had time to react before he slid across the hood, using the momentum to disarm one of them and twist his rifle away. In a blink, he drove an elbow into the man's face, sending him sprawling to the ground. The truckers followed suit. Reggie let out a war cry as he fired off 2 rounds, forcing the cartel to scatter. Clyde tackled one of the gunmen into the dirt, wrestling for control of a pistol. The other truckers, armed with whatever they could grab, wrenches, crowbars, and sidearms, joined the fray. The cartel had expected a massacre. Instead, they were being dismantled. Jack turned just as the first set of police trucks rolled onto the scene, sirens blaring. The cartel fighters realized they were outnumbered. Some turned and ran toward their vehicles, trying to escape before the police could box them in. Jack grabbed the cartel leader before he could flee, slamming him against the side of a truck. "You picked the wrong convoy, amigo," he growled. The leader spat blood onto the ground. "This isn't over." Jack smirked. "Yeah, it is." As the police swarmed in, handcuffing the remaining cartel members, Jack turned to his crew. They were bruised, some bleeding, but they were alive. Reggie dusted himself off, shaking his head. "You ever gonna have a normal haul, Jack?" Jack let out a low chuckle. "Wouldn't know what to do with myself." As the dust settled, one thing became clear. The cartel had learned a lesson that day. And Jack? He was already thinking about the next road ahead. Jack leaned against the hood of his truck, breathing deeply as the last rays of the sun dipped below the horizon. The flashing red and blue lights of the Mexican Federal Police illuminated the desert around them, casting long shadows over the battered convoy. The battle was over, but the weight of what had just happened settled on him like a heavy load. Reggie walked up beside him, wiping sweat and dirt from his brow. "Well, that was something," he muttered, shaking his head. "Didn't wake up this morning expecting to be in a damn cartel shootout." Jack let out a dry chuckle, running a hand through his dust-covered hair. "Yeah, well, neither did they." The truckers stood together, some nursing bruises, others still gripping makeshift weapons, tire irons, wrenches, and whatever they had grabbed in the chaos. They weren't soldiers, at least not anymore, but when it mattered, they fought like hell to protect their own. And they had won. The cartel gunmen who weren't dead or unconscious were lined up, hands cuffed behind their backs while the police secured the scene. A few officers came up to Jack, one of them nodding in approval. "You and your men held your own," the officer said in Spanish, tipping his hat. "Most people would have rolled over and given up." Jack crossed his arms, watching as the cartel leader was shoved into the back of a police vehicle. "Most people aren't us." The officer studied Jack for a moment before glancing at the convoy of trucks, still intact despite the damage. "You should leave soon. There will be more of them. Maybe not today, but the cartel doesn't forget." Jack knew that all too well. He had spent years in war zones, fighting enemies who never truly disappeared. But he also knew fear was a weapon, and today, the cartel had learned that some men weren't afraid to fight back. As the police continued their work, Jack turned to his crew. "All right, boys, let's get moving before we overstay our welcome." Reggie let out a tired laugh. "What, no celebration? No beers after taking down a cartel hit squad?" Jack smirked. "You buy the beers, and I might consider it." With that, the truckers climbed back into their rigs, engines roaring to life once more. The convoy, battered but unbroken, rolled out of the ambush site, leaving the chaos behind them. Jack stared out at the open road ahead, gripping the wheel a little tighter than usual. He'd been in plenty of fights before, but this one felt different. Maybe because it wasn't just his life on the line. It was his brothers in arms, men who had put everything on the line to stand beside him. As the highway stretched on, the events of the day played over in his mind. The cartel had thought they were untouchable, that they could hijack a convoy and walk away without consequence. But they had made one crucial mistake. They picked the wrong men to mess with. Jack exhaled slowly, rolling down the window to let the cool desert air wash over him. The job wasn't just about driving cargo anymore. It never really had been. It was about the bond between the men on the road, the unwritten code of those who refused to be pushed around. Tonight, they had made a statement. And if the cartel ever came knocking again, Jack and his crew would be ready.